Welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show. Excited to be with you here today on this Thursday. Man, we're creeping ever so closer to the start of the college football season next week, or next month, rather. There will be games being played. And we already have the media days going on, Steele, with Big 12 media days and everything going there. I was never privileged enough to get invited to the Big 10 media days. They always take 3 players, and I think the defensive guy they took my senior year, one of them, if not 2, probably A.J. Hawk and Nate Sally, maybe, are 2 captains on the defensive side of the ball. So fun time for those guys to be out there and see everything that's going on that'll be happening for them here at the end of the month. But we're pleased to welcome our guy, Bill Bender, from the Sporting News, as we always do. And Bill, we got the launch of media days that are starting, and really what has become like a full month-long affair because everybody wants their own, specific time. And I thought, man, this is so early for the Big 12 to do this. But if you look at it, I mean, they get their own week, and arguably after the 4th of July is some of the deadest air time of the year for sports.
It's early, but it's smart on the Big 12's part. They're kind of the kickoff to this whole thing between the 4 conferences. I've watched all the coverage the last 2 days. One thing I will say for Brett Yormark, and this is his 4th year, he is very good at marketing, very, very effective marketing. The Monster deal, the Monster Energy drink, now it's called, I got to get this right, the Big 12 football, or Monster Big 12 football. So that one word brings $20 million into your conference, or whatever the amount of money is. Everybody's going to get paid. You'll put a patch on your jersey. Some of us scoff at that as a traditionalist, but the reality is that's going to bring a lot of money into a conference that's still playing catch up with the SEC and the Big Ten. So I think it's a good move for them. And obviously there was a lot of Texas Tech talk yesterday or the day before, but it seems like they've moved on a little bit from the Sorsby saga that we talked about all through June.
But before we get going any more with that, Bill, and Brett Yormark was in a unique situation because he's trying to move forward, but you have your conference suing one of the teams in there, and the preeminent team right now in the Big 12 being Texas Tech. And he was asked a couple of questions about the Sorsby situation. And, I get it. Like, he doesn't want to talk about it. And he said, that's for a different time. And I would beg to ask the follow-up, like, you don't coach any teams. You're not preparing any teams to play. Your job is to handle PR and answer questions. And the follow-up I would have, Bill, is when is the appropriate time for them to answer questions on this in Texas Tech and Sorsby?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost the PR strategy I would have had, take it head on, right? Because you opened yourself up to questions about Cincinnati and whether or not they're going to be, investigated, essentially. You could have squashed that. I know you're trying to have unity within the conference. I thought that was an opportunity for him. Whereas Joey McGuire attacked it much better. He talked about how, yes, there are things they could have done differently. And yes, the thing that surprised me is that other coaches within the Big 12 were supporting him. He was getting texts from Kalani Sitake and Eric Morris and even, Kenny Dillingham. And you forget that these guys are coaches and, they have their group, those text chats and those kind of things. And there was some support for him because I think a lot of those coaches are navigating the same things that Joey was navigating. So I thought that was kind of eye-opening. And, the other part of this was Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, being not the main attraction. I mean, the last couple of years, he was the guy that everybody gravitated toward. He looks healthy. I don't want to say much healthier, but he looks very healthy, which is great because I've said all along, Deion is great for the game of college football. Whether you like him, don't like him, and something in between, I think what he's brought to the Big 12 in Colorado, some star power, and you want to see him coach for a little bit longer.
Yeah, on the Deion Colorado wave, what did you think about their quarterback coming out and basically saying they're going out there, not watching any film, kind of just playing high school level football? Because that, I'll be honest, Bill, that really pissed me off to a certain extent. But what do you think about that whole situation?
Well, I mean, obviously that's as they say in dodgeball, that's a bold strategy. It's not. I think you obviously need to do the prep and the work and the film. And this is a big year for Colorado because they are 2 years removed from Shedeur and Travis Hunter, which, on one hand, it was remarkable that they won 9 games that season, but on the other, you saw that it went the other way pretty quickly. And it's easy to jump off bandwagons in sports. And this was a case where we did that. So I do think it's a big year for Colorado on the field scheme wise. And that's always been the question with, what are they doing there on the field? And, Shedeur and Travis were good enough they probably could play that way. And I'm not saying they were, but they were very good college football players. So it is an interesting year for the Buffaloes to see if they can get back. They could be a sleeper in that league. There's a lot of parity in the Big 12. So, the difference between Houston as one of the top or BYU versus some of those schools at the bottom, like Oklahoma State could have a good year with Eric Morris in year 1. So that's what makes that conference really entertaining.
You mentioned 2 years ago, 2 years removed from 9-3. Last year, 3-9. Again, not great. Deion, all the health problems. Do you think this is the last year we see Deion Sanders coaching at Colorado?
Well, I would say 1 to 2 years. And again, you can't predict health. Last year, obviously coming off the surgeries and the things that he was going through versus this year. Like I said, you saw a more vibrant Deion Sanders on the podium this year. He was joking around. He sounded more like the Deion that we're used to on the podium, having fun. And, he's always been sure of himself. And I think as long as he wants to coach, he will. But I would guess anywhere between 1 to 3 years, which is a lot of critics thought he was going to leave when Shedeur left. Or Shiloh and Shedeur. And so I think it's been good that he's stuck with it. I do think he enjoys coaching football. He's made a positive impact on a lot of players. That people can question his methods all they want, but I think behind the flash, I've always said this, even as the player with Deion, who as a Packers fan I couldn't stand because he was always picking off passes for the Cowboys, but that's out of a respect way. He behind the flash and the prime persona, there's an old school football player and there's an old school coach in there. And I've seen that over the years, time and time again.
Yeah, and people forget that part. Of course he's flashy, but that, like you said, is all a persona. He's still a football player at heart. And the fact that he's made Colorado relevant again, I mean, they haven't really been talked about since their national championship back in 1990. So just the fact that they're getting talked about, that's huge for the Buffalo. So I am glad that he's been able to do what he's done down over there.
Yeah, and we'll see if he continues that. I think as far as other storylines coming from that conference, I think BYU and Utah are very interesting teams. BYU with Kalani Sitake, another no-nonsense football coach who's just trying to push them into the playoff. And the thing with Texas Tech that I think is so important for the Big 12 is they probably should mend this fence with Brett Yormark and move forward and do what they can, because I do think that's the organization, the school that's best positioned to end a national championship drought. The Big 12 hasn't. You mentioned 1990 Steele. The Big 12 hasn't won a national championship since 2005. 2005-06 season with Vince Young and Mac Brown, and obviously Texas is gone. Now that was a legendary top 5 team all time, arguably. But when you're on a 21-year drought as a conference, I think Texas Tech is the one school there with the money, the resources, the willingness to do what they're going to do to maybe push that team into being a national championship contender. And that's what the conference needs to do next.
So, Bill, with that, you heard Joey McGuire come out and, it's funny. And coaches always try to back their guy and saying, well, we brought Sorsby in. It was some depth. Hammond was hurt, and almost alluded to the fact, like, if it wasn't for Hammond being hurt, he would have been the presumptive starter this year. And they'd only kind of went after Sorsby. And I get, like, hey, trying to support your guy and push everything in the right direction with that, but it I don't know if it's disingenuous. But then he also said he thought Hammond would be ready for week 1, which is putting a lot of pressure on a kid coming off an ACL. They play Houston week 3, which I think is the big game that everybody's going to have circled and be looking at to see if you can win that one. Then you've got a really good shot of probably going in 11-1. maybe win the conference again, or even getting back as an at-large team into the playoff.
Atlanta should be the team to step up and secure him.
Yeah, Atlanta's really interesting because they're, much further down the list at only, 8% right now on Kalshi. But this is a team that has constantly come up in terms of GMs thinking, or the reports suggesting that GMs are thinking that Atlanta Braves are the dark horse team to kind of swoop in there and get Scooble. And that's going to be something that, we should pay attention to.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
This is the third time he's been medically checked. Even the refs coming over. He's like, dude, like come on. Like after every sort of play in front of the net, the kind of goal he's done.
Yeah.
He's
stop
on
jumping.
He's on the turf, like you said, like he's like driving off the top rope. Look at him here again. I give him credit. He's freaking fearless.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
The older players in the WNBA going, hey, man, we were here when they were paying us nothing. We were here when we had to go overseas to make a paycheck. You're walking in here, you don't realize how easy you have it. So there is some of that too. But yeah, Jordan got beaten up. Magic got beaten up. Bird got beaten up. Kareem got beaten up. Wemby is getting beaten up, by the way.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
Welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show, and excited to be with our guys, Steele Chambers. As always, Bill Bender joining us each and every week. And, as you roll through the Big 12 and you're looking at some of the favorites, and you've got Utah, you've got BYU, you've got Texas Tech. I think Kansas State's a dark horse, like right on the outside. Maybe Arizona's right on the outside. But there was a team that kind of was in the mix in the Big 12 for a long time, and they had an alumni as a coach. He was part of one of their most successful runs as a player, led their most successful run as a coach. We're talking about the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Mike Gundy, who's no longer there. Eric Morris comes in as the first-year head coach out of North Texas, brings in Drew Mestemaker, who didn't even start in high school, Bill. I mean, this is like Kurt Warner's story part 2. If this dude becomes a great player and you're like, well, you couldn't even start on your high school team, and you go there, you walk on, you start here, you move up, and maybe one day play in the NFL. Who knows? But are you a believer in Eric Morris and the fact that he brought most of that North Texas team with him, including his quarterback? They paid him pretty well. That I don't know, Bill, about them winning 10 games, but maybe this team could find a way to 8 wins this year after going an abysmal 1-11 last season.
You stole like everything I can say to sound smart. So I don't know what I could pile on here, because I think Oklahoma State is that right. You right when you said sleeper, that's the school that jumps out. Because Eric Morris and the quarterback whisperer factor. He is really good with QBs. He had Cam Ward at Incarnate Word. He goes on to Washington State as the offensive coordinator with Cam Ward, goes to North Texas and finds Drew Mestemaker, recruited John Mateer to Washington State. And I remember talking to Eric Morris about this a couple years ago when I was working on a story about Ward. He said one of the reasons he recruited John Mateer was he saw how he turned a double play in baseball with his footwork. So a little bit of a guy that knows what he's talking about with QBs or finds unconventional ways to do it. And I think they are going to be good. If you look at Drew Mestemaker, he was very good in close games, and he was very good in the fourth quarter last year at North Texas. So in a conference where you're going to have a lot of close games and wild finishes, you want a quarterback that's going to be good in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma State, the one that we got accustomed to watching, Bob, was watching them lose to Oregon last year and give up 69 points on the road. That was a shell of that program, and it was time for Gundy to go. But I think they are bringing in a guy that's perfect fit for what they want to do next. I think Eric Morris will do well there.
One more Big 12 before we move on to some of your other questions here. everybody's just putting Utah in there as a plug and play because for 20 years they've been really the same team, dating back to heck when Urban Meyer was there and how consistent they were each year. They had an identity, and when you put on a Utah game, Bill, you knew what you were going to see. Team that was physical up front, had 2 first-round offensive linemen, for heaven's sake. They played really tough, stingy defense. They'd have some NFL talent over there. Usually a quarterback that would make enough plays for you, decent running game, maybe a wide out or two. But you had an idea of what you were going to see. With Kyle Whittingham now gone and Morgan Scaley taken over, and the problem is that I think they thought this would be a little smoother handoff where no one anticipated Whittingham getting the job at Michigan and then maybe gutting a little bit of their staff. Is there a concern that while they have a lot of their players coming back, that maybe the core of that staff, the group that made it so good for so long, being gone, is going to impact this team maybe more than we know?
I agree. I mean, when you have a coach like that has been around for a long time and brought, like when you said you knew what you were going to get with Utah, I just assumed good running game, awesome offensive line, awesome defensive line, especially on the interior with the number of guys that they've produced, the latest being Spencer Fano in Cleveland, who I think is going to have a fantastic career. Devin Dampierre should be pretty good for the Utes this year, but you have a coach that's been around in Morgan Scaley, and so there's not a lot of transition. Sometimes that works when you hand it off, like obviously Ohio State, Urban Meyer to Ryan Day, that worked. Sometimes it doesn't. You could say Jim Harbaugh to Sharon Moore didn't pay off, and others that haven't. And so I think at Utah, just with the culture, the way that they've built that program, yes, there'll be more of the same, but there are things with Kyle Whittingham that I'm sure on a day-to-day basis are going to change, and that makes it a little more difficult. You can't just have a coach be there that long who was, I think with Utah, you could bank 9 wins. Sometimes, I mean, they've won 10 or more games for the last 7 years. So I think when you lose that kind of presence, it's not given that there'll be double-digit wins every year. And, that's what makes it interesting between Utah, BYU, Texas Tech, Houston, and some of those sleepers in the conference. We can say BYU is going to win the league, which is what I have on paper right now. But, it could be any one of those schools.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. I feel like BYU, this is their year in the Holy War to really take it to them. You've got Sataki, of course, at head coach. You've got Bear Bachmeier coming into a sophomore year. I feel like he's going to have a really stellar year. So this is BYU's year. I feel like they're really going to knock Utah off. They've just got so many new pieces that they're trying to figure out over there. Yeah, BYU, they're going to have Utah's number. And then, of course, you've got Texas Tech coming in who can get in. There's only so many Big 12 teams you can have in a 12-team playoff. So I feel like those are probably the top 2, maybe a sleeper here and there. But Utah probably going to end up with 7 or 8 wins, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a tough schedule as well. So, again, it's going to be a fun conference to see. BYU, you mentioned them. They play Notre Dame this year. What a game that's going to be on top of their Big 12 schedule. And with LJ Martin, who is the preseason Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. I think they have a way of doing things. They're tough to beat at home. They have a great turnover differential at home. It's these first couple years when you had new teams in the Big 12 and BYU came in, one of the things I always thought was, wait till Kansas State goes out there or wait till this team goes out there. You've never played in Provo, right? So it's a different environment. And now that all these teams have been in the league for a few years, maybe that's a little bit different. But that's one of those impacts of realignment when you've never played at Utah or never played at BYU or never played at Arizona State when it's 1,000 degrees. You got to make the adjustment to those things.
All right, Bill put together the sporting news. He did the all football. It is titled College Football Predictions for the 2026 Bowl Games, 12-team playoff national championships. You've got all the bowl games in there. But what I was most curious to see is where you had teams ranked coming into the playoff. And so we'll start off with the 4 teams getting byes. Your 1 seed Indiana, 2 seed Georgia, 3 seed Notre Dame, 4 seed Ohio State. I don't disagree with any of that, Bill. I'm not saying, positive or negative, just your rationale on those top 4 teams, kind of where they're sitting.
Well, Ohio State, Indiana, that's telling you that they're going to play again, and then maybe they play twice. And the hard thing with doing these bowl predictions is I could flip it the other way and say, what if I said Indiana won the regular season game and Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship? Then you're just flipping 1 and 4 the other way.
Welcome back in the Bobby Carpenter Show, talking to our guy, Bill Bender, the sporting news. Give him a follow on X at BillBender92. And so we talked about your top 4, Indiana, Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State. So you're thinking, okay, did Ohio State win the regular season? Indiana won the Big Ten championship. Like, you can make those natural inferences when you're looking at some of this. Texas being there at number 5. Are we to assume, Bill, that Ohio State then beat Texas in Austin on the opening week?
That's the other one. Could one beat one in the regular season, then they trade and play again? We talked about this on this show last week, where this is a potential for a growing rivalry because they're going to see each other more. They have so much money, so much resources, so much talent at both places that it's impossible not to believe that they would see each other a couple times. This would tell me that, yeah, Ohio State wins that game, and then Texas maybe gets to the SEC championship, which they did 2 years ago, loses to Georgia, gets the 5 seed. And then you get into a situation where they would be playing Pac-12 Boise State, by the way, because we can also assume that the group of 6 school most of the time is probably going to be that 12 seed, unless they're undefeated or, ranked in the top 15 somehow. But Boise State, perhaps UNLV, also even North Dakota State in their first year in the Mountain West Conference could be a candidate to get that spot.
Yeah, that seems like a very coveted spot nowadays, that 5 spot where you're playing one of those group of 6 teams. It feels like it's not necessarily a bye week, but kind of a tune-up week where you're not really showing everything you got because you're playing a Boise State or you're playing a Tulane, and you just have the talent where you don't need to go out there and, I guess, show everything. So what big upsets do you have coming up? I just really want to see just a full picture of this playoffs because I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think we have USC in the playoff. We have them playing Miami. That was one that caught people's attention. That one, we had USC, and then 2, I had them winning a game. Beating Miami in the first round, which would assume that Miami wins the ACC championship. The Trojans go in. That would be a fun first round playoff game, by the way, if you had the U playing the Trojans. One of the things about these playoff matchups is you come across, and they haven't played, obviously in a long time. So, if you have that matchup come materialize and you have Maiyava playing against Mensa, that would be fun to see. So that was one of the surprises. And then you get into the quarterfinal round where you have matchups like Ohio State and Texas. And, You have Notre Dame in the quarterfinal round, no problem this time. So it starts to get more fun at that point when, those are the ones that are hard to predict. I'm not copping out because these are my predictions. We do them every year. But, last year, for example, I had Texas and Ohio State in the championship game because at the time I thought those are the one thing I do when I make these predictions is you kind of weigh on those are the most talented rosters. Yeah. And that does matter in a 12-team setup.
It really does. The irony is you have Texas then. I mean, apparently Ohio State winning that first one, Texas winning the rematch in the playoffs, moving on. Another team that you had making the playoffs and winning a game, Ole Miss, down there led by Steele Chambers. I think that's going to be one of the more intriguing teams to watch this year, Bill, when you start talking and looking at this. USC being in there, that was a crazy surprise because they should be pretty talented. Can Lincoln Riley get it done? But can the Ole Miss train keep on rolling even without Lane Kiffin? LSU noticeably absent from there with Georgia, Texas, of Oklahoma, and Ole Miss. It was difficult to kind of parcel that out. And do you believe, that the Rebs are going to be better than LSU this year?
I do, and I think they're going to win that game when they play on September 19th. Now, I could change that and watch when we're talking in like week 3, watch me pick LSU to win that game in my predictions file. But I do think Trinidad Chambers, and they have enough to get back there. Now, that spot could be LSU, and it could be Alabama. Alabama's got one of the softer schedules out of the SEC teams. So, again, Kalen DeBoer and that program, maybe out of sight, out of mind isn't the worst thing in the world. Now, what also struck me with this quarterfinal round is I definitely have 4 Big Ten teams in there, Indiana, Ohio State, USC. And then what would be just an amazing matchup if we got it would be Oregon, Notre Dame. We've talked about Dan Lanning and Marcus Freeman being kind of the 2 coaches that are fighting for that title of best coach without a national championship right now. And if they were matched up, boy, I think home field or not home field, I guess proximity might matter in that one, depending on what bowl game they were at. You'd have a fantastic matchup there between those schools.
All right, so I'm glad you have Oregon in there because I've been really curious what they're going to present this year. It feels like they've kind of just been playing the second fiddle to whoever else is winning national championships, whether it be Ohio State or Indiana. What do you think it's going to take for Dan Lanning and the Ducks to really take a step and feel like actually compete at the playoff level and not just participate? Because they always do really well in the regular season, but once they get to that point, it feels like they're always losing by 30 or 40. So what do they have to do in order to actually get a win in the playoffs and I guess not stay relevant, but just take that next step?
I mean, the teams they've lost to the last 2 years, they've run into some buzzsaws, right? They ran into Ohio State at precisely the wrong time in the Rose Bowl. And then again with Indiana last year, where that was one of those games from the time D'Angelo Pons intercepted the pass and had the pick 6, you knew they were in a little bit of trouble. So it is a big year for Oregon, though.
Columbus, listen up. Smart Choice Baths has officially arrived in our city, and they're kicking things off with a massive win to celebrate the new division. They have partnered with me and Big Play to give away a complete bathroom remodel valued up to $10,000. We're talking a brand new shower tub installed for free. No purchase necessary. Just go to smartchoicebaths.com or scan the QR code to enter right now. That's smartchoicebaths.com. Get it on this before the prize period ends, and don't let your bathroom sit on the bench any longer. And welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show. We always do our lift it or leave it during our headlines here, and we're going to do that again. But I want to have first one other question here for you, Bill. Lay out your national championship game. Who is it between, and who do you ultimately have winning it?
Well, and knowing, my audience, on my social media pages. So when I had Texas beating Ohio State, I expected like an avalanche of comments. Didn't get that. So that tells me that, we're just used to having Ohio State in that spot and Texas in that spot. What really took off in my mentions was this idea of Notre Dame and Indiana playing in a national championship game. And I did not realize the bitterness between those two, because it was just Notre Dame.
You didn't realize people cared at Indiana? Like,
I didn't realize they cared about football in Indiana like we do around here in Ohio, because it got brutal between the Irish and the Hoosiers. And then you think about it from both ways. On one hand, Indiana, and I have it up right here, Indiana hasn't beat Notre Dame. You're looking at a rivalry where they haven't beat Notre Dame since 1950.
Ooh.
So you're looking at I'm trying to add that up, 76-year streak of haven't beat the Irish. And then on the other hand, the Irish haven't won a national championship since 1988, and they had to watch Indiana do it. And that means that people in Indiana, when you got to go to work and your buddy's the fan of the other team, and you got to listen to that. So imagine all the angst that would build up toward a game if those two played. It would be super entertaining to see Signetti. I would assume that Indiana's still ruling and Signetti's trying to go back to back. And on the other end, it would assume that Marcus Freeman's trying to win a national title for Notre Dame. It would be fantastic. Now, I think a couple teams, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, all could get in the way of that because of the talented rosters, right? I think Texas and Ohio State and Notre Dame have the three most talented rosters in the country right now. So any one of those teams could make that run.
All right. I want to point out something here. And prior to 98, there was no BCS. And so there was no true national championship game. But Bill, just looking at this, and I was trying to scroll through my mind with the BCS, college football playoff, and even through the 90s when you could get some of those 1 versus 3, 1 versus 4 matchups where the winners probably winning the national championship. To have two teams from the state doing it, I think this would be the first time since that 96 game, maybe it was 97 bowl game where Florida State and Florida rematched and Florida won the national title, where you'd have an intrastate battle for a national title, which would, I don't know if people could probably see that in Florida, given the proliferation of talent there and the 3 big schools that have all won national championships in the last 30 years versus Indiana, which Notre Dame had won since 88, and Indiana, they haven't beaten Notre Dame since 1950, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, that Sugar Bowl, Florida State, Danny Warfel, the first one, they played in the regular season. Florida State won. The Bull Wearers were just all over Danny Warfel. I remember that. And then they play again. I believe the final score was, I want to say 52-24, something like that, where Florida was just on fire. And they end up winning the national championship. So it would be one of those scenarios. I was talking to Steele before we came on today, and I think a closer to home scenario would be something like if the Bearcats played Ohio State in the playoff. I think you'd have that kind of energy because of the Cincinnati. I mean, you played in that game, right, Bob, where they had that really close game during the national championship season with Ohio State. Ohio State's had the upper hand, obviously. Cincinnati's had to incrementally rise their program to get into Power 4 status with the Big 12. They've obviously had a playoff appearance. I think there'd be similar energy there if there was ever a Cincinnati-Ohio State football game. Certainly a basketball game, which I saw the story this week circulating that I was a fan of it, that they might do an exhibition series where Ohio State, Cincinnati, Xavier, and Dayton play in a basketball tournament of sorts to start the season. I would argue you should throw the top 2 Ohio MAC schools in there to make it even more fun. And then you make a weekend of it in basketball. I can't imagine a better weekend. My buddies, I know we would all go to that. So, yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying that's kind of the energy I'm getting when you see Indiana and Notre Dame potentially playing for a national title.
Oh, they could do a little pool play, do 6 teams, 3-3. Your winner comes out and you can play consolation games across there. And I think for the Ohio Cup, I think that'd be tremendous. All right, we're going to hit a little lift it or leave it. This is one of my favorite segments. I love doing with you guys each and every week. And I saw this yesterday, and I think it's been since Saban's second year that Bama has finished no lower than 5th in the composite recruiting rankings. Now, recruiting rankings aren't everything, but I always tell people if you're 25th, you're probably not a top 5 recruiting program. We can argue is 4 better than 7 and is 12 better than 18 or whatever. But when you start getting these big spreads, it matters. I think there's only a handful of 5-stars left that haven't committed. And right now, people don't flip as much anymore, Bill, because I think some of these guys sign their NI deals beforehand. Bama is currently sitting at 50 in the composite recruiting rankings. They have 1 4 and like 4 4-stars. I don't think it's possible for them to jump into the top 5, maybe not even the top 10. Lift it or leave it. I mean, Kalen DeBoer, this run with him might be on life support after this year.
I will give it, because he signed the extension, I'm going to leave it. But I would say 3 years from now, if they don't make a deep run into the playoff, I could see them looking elsewhere. It really reached a boiling point last year, obviously, after the Florida State loss. But once they beat Georgia, he was okay. And I think they did have a tough schedule. There's a little bit of an acceptance that it's not going to be like Saban again. But then again, you're Alabama, right? You should be able to recruit at a high level. It's not – we mentioned the Ohio State transition. Georgia went from Mark Richt to Kirby Smart, and there were a lot of things written, probably by me, that it would be really tough to do what Mark Richt did, and Kirby Smart has done it better. So you still have to be able to recruit at a high level. I almost jumped out of my chair when you said 50th.
Yeah.
I can't believe they're that low in the rankings.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and lift that. I know he just signed a new extension, but of course you didn't think that he was going to come in and do any better than Saban. But you expected him to kind of maintain that level for as long as he could. And I think we're 3 years out now. Now he's dropping out all the way to 50th in recruiting. Like that's terrible to hear. I mean, you are Alabama. You should be able to get these recruits in and signed. So I'm going to lift that. That's that right there. That hurt my heart a little bit, man.
I'm going to lift it too because I know this. I know Ohio State's in the running for a guy out of Alabama. I think Michigan's. But there's been players that are going to the Big Ten now, Bill, that are getting plucked out of the state of Alabama, which that reversal never happened before. And I think that's the one thing where if he's not winning 10 games and winning a playoff game this year, people are going to be very upset, not just because of, the fact that maybe you're not winning, but the recruiting and the perception that you're losing in-state talent to like not Georgia, not LSU, but maybe some northern schools now, which NIL has kind of changed all of that. Lift it or leave it. The Big 12. Check that. What is it? The monster
energy,
monster football Big 12, whatever the heck it is. $20 million they got for that. We're going to start seeing in the next 2 years, Big Ten, SEC, ACC, all the conferences, not just individual teams, but conferences will be selling their naming rights as well for jersey patches.
Oh, lift it. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the Big Ten will be called. I mean, they sponsor the media days. They sponsor the Big Ten championship game, right? Like, I don't know if you guys drink those. My kid drinks the Monster Energy drinks. They're okay, right? Like I'm like an old school, just drink a can of pop guy. Like I don't need that much. So, but as far as the Big Ten and the SEC, yes, I think they'll have patches on the jerseys. They'll have field logos. They'll have those kind of things because you have to raise revenue to pay the players and pay for all of these things that we're doing in the arms race that is college football. So I was just trying to think of what the Big Ten, a couple suggestions for what that might be. It'll probably be a pretty big name.
Atlanta should be the team to step up and secure him.
Yeah, Atlanta's really interesting because they're, much further down the list at only, 8% right now on call sheet. But this is a team that has constantly come up in terms of GMs thinking, or the reports suggesting that GMs are thinking that Atlanta Braves are the dark horse team to kind of swoop in there and get Scoogle. And that's going to be something that, we should pay attention to.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
This is the third time he's been medically checked. Even the refs coming over. He's like, dude, like come on. Like after every sort of play in front of the net, the kind of goal he's done. He's
stop jumping.
He's on the turf, like you said, like he's like driving off the top rope. And look at him here again. I give him credit. He's freaking fearless.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
The older players in the WNBA going, hey, man, we were here when they were paying us nothing. We were here when we had to go overseas to make a paycheck. You're walking in here, you don't realize how easy you have it. So there is some of that too. But yeah, Jordan got beaten up. Magic got beaten up. Bird got beaten up. Kareem got beaten up. Wemby is getting beaten up, by the way.
Outspoken with Dan Sileo, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You get better numbers, but every selection has to win. It doesn't matter what you bet if you don't have the insights. Tune into SportsGrid and get ahead of the class.
All right, Steele. So we can agree. I mean, there's an issue with tampering, correct, in college football. Like that's a thing.
Yeah, it's out there.
Yeah. So the NCAA is trying to get like a hold and get control of some of this stuff. And so Ross Dellinger put out some stuff. And you put that first tweet up there, Pat, and we go to the second one. It said, during its June meeting, the NCAA D1 Board of Directors did indeed review a new tampering framework that would permit contactable athletes and their agents to communicate with schools before the portal opens. Per the report, the board is seeking this member feedback, reviewed contactable student-athlete portal window before the window opens. They're going to try to figure out like another window for that. And so I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty positive when you start talking about it. However, then there's like the other side of it too, Steele, where, and by the way, if you have the portal window and you're going to cut that down, like I would cut it to 7 days. I think you could probably have 3 or 4 days before, like if you want to talk to schools and help set up your visits and figure that out. I mean, that sounds okay, correct?
Yeah, that's fine. It's probably smarter to do that, honestly.
Yeah, like so you give them a little window, you can start like legally talking to another team and you can figure that out. And so that makes a lot of sense. However, then here's something. If you're going to put some rules in place, you have to be able to follow through with them. And there have to be punishments, Steele, if you don't follow up. And the NCAA board also said that, one, it adjusted its language on tampering to make it more of a presumption of guilt, which is the opposite of how the U.S. Legal system works in a criminal way, and reaffirmed that athletes are held accountable in tampering cases, rejected a memo from the Big Ten for a moratorium on tampering. Your thoughts upon hearing the other side of maybe more now on the punishment angle and what that's going to potentially look like for tampering?
It's interesting that now they're kind of just now they're bringing in the athletes. If they're involved, they're getting in trouble too. Would that result in, I guess, suspensions and possible fines now that they're getting paid millions of dollars?
Do you think that's good or bad?
I think it's good. I think if you want to run it like the NFL, then at some point you need to have fines and stuff like they do in the NFL. I mean, I want to say that these are kids, but at this point you're dealing with millions of dollars. They need to have, I guess, the education in order to go about processes and not be breaking rules, whether that be tampering or gambling, like we talked about with Sorsby. So, yeah, there's got to be punishments, of course, for the coaches, like everything that was going on with Lane Kiffin, whatever the tampering was over there. There should have been some kind of punishments, I believe, if all of that was true. And then, of course, the players need to have a little bit of punishment as well if they know what they're doing is bad and they're still doing it. So,
Well, and that's the thing is, like, if you're going to punish the schools, I get that, and you should punish the coaches. I think there's 3 groups that are all complicit in this. I think maybe even 4. Talk about the schools getting punished. Like, so how do you do that? You can probably fine them because the schools, they're the ones hiring the coaches. Schools are getting fined. Coaches, they should get fined or have game suspensions and have their own unique punishments. I think that's another bucket that you put in there and you get involved with. I think the third bucket is obviously the players. Should they be penalized as much as the coaches? Maybe not. But like, if you're going to give a coach a 2-game suspension for him being caught tampering, or maybe he gets a 1 game and a fine, do you give the player a fine? Do you give him a suspension? Hell, still, do you give him the right to choose? Would you rather pay some of your money or sit out for a game? I'd love to see what guys choose on that. You know what I'm saying?
That'd be awesome.
Hey, still think about it. 50, you get fined $50,000, or do you get to miss a game? I'd like to see what guys choose.
I would have to choose $50,000. It depends on the game, though.
Well, you guys opened up with Notre Dame twice. Imagine if you're opening up with Ball State.
Yeah, I might just have to bite the bullet and just I'm skipping that game, I guess.
And that's the point. Is like, it depends sometimes on who you play.
Yeah,
to open the season. And it's interesting because you talk about guys and what they value in this world, and if you're willing to lose a game versus playing, that's versus paying to play, essentially. I think that's a very interesting paradigm of where we've gotten to as well.
I could see maybe a booster or two stepping in saying, hey, just go ahead and skip this game, pay the fine, and then we'll reimburse you. I feel like that could be something that they would also do. So, that would almost eliminate the problem or the punishment altogether, but maybe you could try to work around that. I'm not sure.
And that's the thing, the fines, like if someone else is paying them, they don't really feel the same. So is it worth it? I don't know. Do you fine a percentage of their NIL deal? I don't know. And then the fourth group, and this is the group that you have in the NFL that there needs to be some regulation around it. And the only way you probably get this is with collective bargaining. But still, if the agents if they are involved in this and they're the ones that are driving it, they should also receive penalties, whether it's suspended license, fines, different things, because they're the ones that are probably pushing this the most with the coaches more so than the players.
Yeah, and I've never been big on agents in college. I feel like there are way too many instances where they're taking advantage of these guys, not understanding certain things, and they just, I don't know, they just do things without them even knowing. So honestly, that bucket should be probably higher up than the players.
Well, and that's they may be reaching out and the players don't even know. And so
exactly,
if you can see, and here's the best part, Steele, it's all digital.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the player's like, it wasn't me, it was the agent. Well, we saw you texting this coach yourself. So we have that built in. But if the agent's doing it unbeknownst to the player, which should be pretty easy to prove, given your ability to clear yourself, like, hey, he told me to go do this, and I told him no, so he went around my back or whatever. And it's like, hey, all that stuff is going to be on this guy that you're going to be able to pull up and ultimately see. So that's another dynamic that is going to be interesting. But this is the first time, Steele, where we've seen them want to put some teeth into it. And how interesting do you find it where Tony Petitti asked for a moratorium on these penalties until they could kind of figure some stuff out? Do you like that idea, or do you think it should be punishable right now?
I like that idea. It is extreme in a sense, so I think just throwing it out there, just making it law right away would be a little too fast. So I think you take your time with this one, considering all the people it would affect if it goes into place, especially with this last offseason with how much tampering could have been out there. So I would take a beat, wait a second, and then enforce the law once you have it completely set in stone and you're confident that it will work once you put it into play in college football.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys,
you want it right now, don't you? You want it right now.
Well, I think like putting a moratorium on it, I'm trying to figure out like what's the purpose of that? Is there a reason why the Big Ten wants a moratorium on tampering? Like Wisconsin lost one of their safeties to Miami. I mean, there's been players that have left because they've been tampered with. Columbus, listen up. Smart Choice Baths has officially arrived in our city, and they're kicking things off with a massive win to celebrate the new division. They have partnered with me and Big Play to give away a complete bathroom remodel valued up to $10,000. We're talking a brand new shower tub installed for free. No purchase necessary. Just go to smartchoicebaths.com or scan the QR code to enter right now. That's smartchoicebaths.com. Get it on this before the prize period ends, and don't let your bathroom sit on the bench any longer. All right, welcome back in to the show. Me and Steele here rocking and finishing up here on this Wednesday. And Tim Walton, he's got, Throwback Thursday or Thoughtful Thursday. I forget what his Friday is. But he called it what was it? We Talk About It Tuesday. And it was a message out to BIA and everybody out there in the world that this is what we're all about. And you can toss that up, Pat, when you get a chance. But it's amazing. BIA said the greatest skill a man can develop is the ability to figure it out. I love it because being a problem solver, Steele, is probably the best thing that you can have going for you in your life.
Absolutely. I think they talk about it with Navy SEALs that they're not the smartest people in the world, but if you put them in any situation and give them any single problem possible, they're going to solve it. I think that's just the cornerstone of being just a sick individual, just having stuff presented to you that you may be planning for, may not be, and you're able to just figure it out. Those are the kind of people I want around me, because whenever stuff hits the fan, you want those guys and those women that aren't going to freak out and aren't going to be able to handle it. So the dude's like a coked up Buddha. I don't know how he comes up with all these sayings, but they're just.
You call him a coked up Buddha?
Yeah, because he's got like the wisdom of Buddha, but then he's got a little extra oomph to him. So coked up.
That's amazing. I'll have to tell Tim. Steele described you as a coked up Buddha. He'll be like, what? Tim. Tim's like one of the Wayans brothers out there. He's got so much juice and like running around. He's tremendous. That is true, though. But honestly, like when you talk about being in a game, that skill is more important than anything, because people always talk about halftime adjustments. They're not halftime adjustments. They're series by series adjustments. But there's even times, Steele, where you might be at the beginning of a series and they start doing something. They come out in a formation or start running a play that you guys haven't practiced or you haven't done against this, defense. And you've got to find a way to solve it on the field without freaking out, losing your mind. You don't want to give up a touchdown and be like, well, we let them score, but now we can go draw it up on the board. It's, can we find a way to get off the field? And I always look back against you guys in that Georgia Fiesta Sugar Bowl where, I'm sitting there watching it with my neighbors. I went down early and I did some of the media stuff. I flew back. It was on New Year's Eve. And I'm sitting there watching them, and one of my neighbors is losing his mind. He's like, see, they're driving. They're going to score. They haven't scored yet. And so they drive all the way down the field. You guys hold them to a field goal. I'm like, you figured it out. You found a way to get a stop when you need to. You go to the sideline. What were they doing? How are they doing it? And then we're good to go. And that there's no, it's honestly, it's probably the most important skill that you're going to find in life of, hey, things are happening to you. They're coming at you right now. Can you figure them out and solve them in real time? All right. Put a little pin in that. Steele, we got a couple of minutes left. Any sage wisdom or advice or parting thoughts?
That's all the sage wisdom you need, man. Just go out there, be a problem solver. If something gets presented to you that you're not really sure what to do with, just take the time. I guess rely on your training. If you have any training, I don't know if you do, and just solve the problem out.
I love it. Just solve the problem. I had to solve a problem between my two kids last night about wanting to borrow e-bikes, and there's some distrust because some of the promises before weren't kept. I'm like, all right, well, let's try to put some constraints on the backside of this and figure out, hey, you know what? If you don't follow through on this, what is going to happen? And do we feel good about what the compensation and what the punishment will be, and trying to build that all into totality? So it's not the easiest thing in the world, but whether you're a coach or a parent, that's what you're tasked to do, is to solve the problems and to figure it out. All right. That is it for today's show. We're getting back at this, hopefully with Bill Bender tomorrow, break down all the stuff here. There's a lot of Big 12 news that we're going to get into, how some of that stuff impacts the Big 10, some of the things that they're doing, they're trying. But a shorter show today, so I didn't want to necessarily start diving in to all of that at the present time. So We appreciate your time. Stay locked in. We'll have Bill Bender here with you most likely tomorrow. And we'll catch you soon on the Bobby Carpenter Show.
On the biggest stage in the world, FanDuel is changing the game because sometimes your player gets subbed off and your bet goes with them. Not anymore. With FanDuel's Super Sub, if your player is subbed out, your bet stays in. That's right. If your player loses the match, your bet continues on with the substitute. So you're still in until the final whistle. Because in matches like these, anything can happen, and now your bet can go the distance. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/bigplay to get started now.
21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus. D.C., Kentucky, Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-777. Visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org.
Atlanta should be the team to step up and secure him.
Yeah, Atlanta's really interesting because they're, much further down the list at only, 8% right now on Kyle Sheet. But this is a team that has constantly come up in terms of GMs thinking, or the reports suggesting that GMs are thinking that Atlanta Braves are the dark horse team to kind of swoop in there and get Scoogle. And that's going to be something that, we should pay attention to.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
This is the third time he's been medically checked. Even the refs coming over. He's like, dude, like come on. Like after every sort of play in front of the net, the kind of goal he's done. He's
stop jumping.
He's on the turf, like you said, like he's like driving off the top rope. Look at him here again. I give him credit. He's freaking fearless.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
The older players in the WNBA going, hey, man, we were here when they were paying us nothing. We were here when we had to go overseas to make a paycheck. You're walking in here, you don't realize how easy you have it. So there is some of that too. But yeah, Jordan got beaten up. Magic got beaten up. Bird got beaten up. Kareem got beaten up. Wemby is getting beaten up, by the way.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
Class is in session. Today, let's talk about the teaser. A teaser is a multi-leg bet where you shift the point spread in your favor. You